But thanks all for coming to this chapter training. It's focused on networking for success. And it's the second of 5 trainings that we're doing focused on really strategically getting your state ready to ratify this constitutional amendment. And we've purposefully made this one a Zoom meeting rather than a Zoom webinar, with the goal of making it more interactive. And we'll be sending the recording around for future trainings or future training, I should clarify. Hopefully these will be useful sort of living documents to encourage new chapter members or old chapter members that couldn't make this meeting to review on their own time and hopefully find value in. And because it's a Zoom webinar, if you haven't, or excuse me, because this is a Zoom meeting, I'd recommend people switch their view to speaker view if you haven't already done so. Again, it's up to you. And really, as everyone on this call, I imagine, knows, American Promise has one goal. It's to ratify an amendment to the U.S. Constitution to restore American democracy, where we the people, not big money, not corporations, not unions, not special interests, govern ourselves. And our goal is to do this by July 4th, 2026. It's a big, ambitious goal when we're working backwards from success. And we know a couple things. We know that this amendment can't be won in DC boardrooms with closed door handshakes, that it has to be won state by state, person by person across the country. And that to do this, American Promise provides an ongoing structure of support meant to empower Americans wherever they are in this country to advance this amendment forward meaningfully where you live. And this training is one piece of that structure of support. It's focused on effective networking and outreach strategies. And as I said earlier, but for folks just joining, this is an extension of our training last month, which was on research and analysis. So if you missed that one or want a refresher, you can find a recording on our YouTube channel, which we'll certainly send a link to in the recap email following this meeting as well. But sort of similar to what we did last month, I think it's always good to remind ourselves why we're working on this amendment in the first place. And I'm hoping for one or two people to share where you're from, what is it that motivates you to be on this call tonight, and in no more than 30 seconds or a minute, why do you care about something like a constitutional amendment to get big money out of politics? Is there anyone who would quickly volunteer for this here at the start of the call?
I don't mind.
Great, take it away.
Okay, let me put my camera on. Hello everyone, my name is Yasmin Blake. I'm a senior in college at Howard University in Roanoke, Virginia. I am a political science pre-law major. I'm actually writing my own constitutional amendment that I hope to get passed in the next 15 years about a different thing. But I'm from Washington, D.C., so I'm kind of grown up in all this politics and everything. And I think it's really important that even though we live in an economy and in a world that's so surrounded by money and everything goes back to money, this is still a country for we the people, not we the money. It should always be we the people before the money, and it doesn't act like that anymore. So I'm here because I want to do my best to make sure we go back to that we the people, not we the corporations.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for joining this call and for being interested in this. I hope you're talking about this with anyone who will listen. I imagine there's a lot of interested people, seniors in college. That was me not so long ago. So thank you for being on this call. And is there anyone else who would like to share quickly? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Jerry Borchard in Tucson, Arizona. And I'm an American Promise because I want to reduce the amount of corruption in politics, and particularly in the Congress and our state legislatures. And also I want to get the dark money, the big money out, because it drowns out our voice. And so I want us to be heard. I want, when we're seeing 60%, 70%, whatever, super majorities of people in favor of a given issue, and to have that ignored in Congress because they're hearing what the special interests want them to hear instead and doing what the special interests want them to do. We've had enough of that. I think it's time to get back to a government of and for the people.
Great. Yeah. Thank you for being here, Jerry. It's well said. And Jeff told me this once. He said, Azor, interpretation of the law is all about conflict and debate. And this really is a battle for what free speech means. The opposition says we can't do this because free speech. And we should lean right into that debate because our argument is far more compelling and it's far more supported by supermajorities of Americans that our current system is drowning out our free speech and that money is a different thing and should be looked at through a different framework. And that's not currently what our Constitution is being interpreted by the Supreme Court. And that's what we're working on. I see Monica has her hand up. Monica, were you wanting to share here at the beginning?
I just wanted to throw in how ironic it is that they say free speech when the only people who get heard are the people who pay for it.
Yeah.
Little double entendre there that always makes me kind of chuckle.
Well said, in a more concise manner than I did. That's exactly right. Well, thank you guys for sharing. And I think it's always good, any call that you're doing or, with chapter members, it's always nice to one, remind ourselves why we're doing this, and two, just practice talking about it. It's going to help in our outreach. It's going to help in our writing. It's going to help in our thinking about this issue and really crystallize really our reason and motivation for doing this. So just as one last reminder, last month we talked about effective research and analysis, and we did a deep dive into a congressperson. We used the example of Rob Portman. For those of you in Ohio, you might say, well, why are we talking about him? He said that he's not running for re-election in 2022. We're still going to use him as an example because there'll still be good things to tease out of that and look into on this call. And he's a Republican. He's a US Senator in Ohio. And last month, we identified a couple of things that were important to him. The two specifically were combating the opioid crisis and preserving our great outdoors. And these were two things that he listed on his accomplishments page on his official congressional website. And so the question we're now going to ask this call is, well, how does that information help guide our networking efforts? Well, it's giving us a clue into the ideal communities to be building relationships with. In this case, we're thinking about engaging people with connections to the opioid crisis in some way, people who care about preserving our great outdoors. And we'll come back to this in a second. But again, is there anyone on the call who can quickly share just about a time that you successfully reached out to somebody about the work of American Promise? Who were they? And really sort of what was the circumstance that led you to reach out, and why do you think it was successful? It doesn't have to be, a member of Congress. It doesn't have to be an organizational head. It could be, your neighbor or someone who ultimately became a consistent member of your chapter. It could be anyone, but I'm just curious to hear an example from someone who's had a really good outreach experience, big or small, and a little bit about why you think it was successful. There's no right answers, but is there someone who would volunteer to share this quickly?
I can share really quick. Actually today, so I had a meeting with a member of Congressman Peter Welch's office today, and I reached out to them on his website just asking to have a conversation about the 28th Amendment because he's a co-sponsor. And hopefully she's going to get back to me about, how the meeting went today. But I'm hoping that I will get an official meeting with the congressman. But I just, with the help of Sam Daly Harris, we just, typed out a small email asking for a meeting and describing like the 28th Amendment and why it was important to me, and then sending it.
Great. So, you went onto your member of Congress's website, you found the contact form, you sent the, meeting requests through the channels they made available. and you got a meeting and had a productive conversation. That's fantastic. Thanks for sharing, Marnie. Is there anyone else who wants to share just an instance of this? It doesn't have to be with the congressional office, but it's exciting when we hear about good meetings with congressional offices, certainly, but it could be with the neighbor next door. Yeah, Ashwari, thank you. And you're muted there, Ashwari.
Okay, I was reading I try to read letters to the editor in our local paper, and I'm from Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I read this one letter, and it was about dark money. And the guy was clear, the letter writer was clearly conservative. And he was anyway, I won't go into the details, but I thought this guy, I bet he would be somebody who would be interested in what we're doing, because he was against dark money and big money in the election. It was around before November. And so I sleuthed around and I found his contact information online, and I called him and we had a conversation, and we talked about this issue, and it wasn't his main issue, but it was something he was interested in. We've texted 3 or 4 times now, and we're developing actually a really interesting relationship. And he's not like jumping into the issue, but the last time he wrote me, he congratulated me on a letter to the editor that I had published, and he said, "Great work. I hope your issue is gaining, steam." So I'm keeping him in my back pocket, sort of nurturing this relationship, because he has access to some conservative groups and people. He's an independent, but very conservative. So I'm kind of like waiting for that moment when I'm going to be able to go and really utilize that connection.
Yeah, and you said you saw that initially through a letter to the editor that he'd written, or through a comment to a letter to the editor?
No, he wrote a letter, and I thought, this guy is somebody who would be interesting. Yeah. And so I just followed up on it. And like I said, I've been investing time building this relationship, and I don't know where it's going to come in useful, but I think it will. If nothing else, he has access to conservative people who might have the ear of our conservative representative in the southern part of the state.
Great. So you saw a letter to the editor that somebody wrote that seemed relatable, and you reached out, you found the contact information, and you asked a bunch of questions and shared what we're doing with American Promise, and we're keeping in touch. Super. Yeah. Thank you, Ashwari. I see Anne has her hand up, so let's have that be the last example. Thank you, Anne.
Well, actually, I just want to echo Ashwari, because I've done the same thing twice in the last week. People have written letters to the editor to the Dallas paper, and I have looked up their addresses and sent them a snail mail letter and asked to, could we have a conversation, and given them a little information about it. So I don't know if either one of them will respond, but I'm trying. So, we'll see.
Yeah.
People love a snail mail letter. And that's a smart thing to be doing with your outreach. And I'm not surprised to hear that's potentially very effective. And what the point I'm trying to make in this particular part of the call is, as we're talking with people, and for those who've been in and around American Promise for a while, this concept is one that we talk about a lot. There's a general thing that's really useful in these type of conversations, and Sam Daly Harris preaches it over and over, and it's active listening. Meaning, really listening to what the other person's telling you, and not judging what they're saying, whether you like it or not, but just listening. I'm imagining a conversation with Ashwari and this person, over text or over a phone call. And I'm not imagining a huge angry debate, but I'm imagining some thoughtful questions back and forth, and over time built up mutual respect, because we're not actively judging, be it positive or negative, but we're listening first. And that's a really key thing to have in the back of our mind, that I think is sometimes easy to take for granted if not explicitly mentioned. But now let's think back to our example. And our example that we talked through last month and are going to keep digging in on a little bit this month is around Rob Portman, a Republican US Senator in Ohio. And he cares about the opioid crisis and lake conservation. And if you'll remember, we found this out by looking at his website. And I'm going to share my screen here. And we're just going to do this again, but take it a step further. So 1 second here. Great. So you're looking at my screen. You see my messy desktop with all of my attachments. And we're on Rob Portman's webpage. And we found this just by Googling Rob Portman, Ohio Congress. This is the first website that comes up. And if you'll remember, last month we looked at his accomplishments because it's usually helpful and interesting to see what a member of Congress really wants to brag about. That's usually a pretty good indication of what's important to them. And we found drug epidemic and opioids were important. And we also saw Great Lakes in our environment. And these were two areas that we thought we could make compelling connections immediately with money and politics. So looking in a little bit more to this, and the Great Lakes in our environment section, one thing I'm always doing and is a helpful skill as we're looking, this is an example of, a member of Congress's accomplishments page, but you could be doing it elsewhere as well. But we're looking for individual names names of individuals or names of organizations that are associated with our members of Congress or whoever it is that we're trying to build a relationship with and better understand. And I'm not reading this fast, but I have looked at this ahead of time, and you might read this in depth and get down to this bullet point and see, okay, well, in August 2019, Senator Portman attended the Great Lakes Maritime Task Force, and they gave him an award for being the legislator of the year. So I see that information and say, well, that's a specific organization that gave him a legislator of the year award. I'm just going to look them up. And sure enough, their website comes up front and center. And now I'm just continuing my research. I want to get a sense of what it is this organization does. And, I'm able to discern pretty quickly that, okay, they try to keep bodies of water clean for the most part. That's about the central thrust of what they do. And okay, as I'm reading this a little bit more, it looks like there was some meaningful reform passed in Congress in 2014 that gives them funds to do this work effectively and at scale. But Congress has to appropriate the funds each year. And that's probably why they're doing this overtly political work of giving awards to members of Congress for presumably helping with the appropriation of their funds. Know a little bit about the organization now, and I see, oh, well, there's actually a legislator awards section. Let's just double check we're in the right place. Sure enough, 2019, Rob Portman. There's a photo. I wonder who these people are. You can see in 2018, they actually gave an award to Jack Bergman in Michigan, and have done so with various members of Congress throughout the Midwest. I see some Republicans, I see some Democrats, and I'm starting to think that I'm in the right place of, an interesting organization that we know has a direct link to this member of Congress that we're trying to better our relationship with and trying to bring more people really to be involved in our chapter, either, really closely or sort of adjacently to continue building this relationship. And so the last thing that I'm looking for is, if there's a way to easily contact this group. And in most places, there'll be some sort of contact form either at the top like this. Sometimes you can scroll all the way to the bottom. I don't know if here. No, you wouldn't see it at the bottom, but you'd see it at the top. And so you could send a message directly through their website, or they give a phone number and they give an email address. So we've got about everything we need to contact this organization. And the question is, well, should we pick up the phone right now and make a call with no plan? Probably not. We should probably think about what our plan should be. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and just help me think through as a group here. You know, we know these things about this organization, that it's important to the person that we're trying to build a relationship with, that they focus on cleaning up lakes, and that they have a direct legislative incentive to have good relationships with members of Congress so they can keep doing their job. And the question is, if we did pick up the phone, for example, or we did send an email, what would be the best initial ask for us to make? Is there anyone who wants to just throw something out there? And I'm hoping to hear a couple different suggestions, and we'll talk it through here.
Well, as a really initial ask, I mean, I would just find out if there's somebody there who would be interested in hearing about our work, and talk about, you know, how it intersects with the things that they're doing, or how it affects the things they're doing.
Yeah, so is there someone there who can share a little bit more about their priorities at that organization, and might also be interested in hearing about American Promise and what we're up to? Anyone else? Yeah, Joan.
Actually, before that, I would go in, I noticed they had some position papers on their website. I'd probably go in and look over them and see if there were some pieces that I could throw into the discussion to get it going, or that I might be able to connect to that ask of issue-related ask with regard to what we do.
Yes. So really showing that you've done your research. You know, you know more about the organization than just the title, and you know, leading into an initial ask along the lines of, I'd like to learn more about your organization, and I'd like to share more about American Promise. You know, other things that we might consider are, you know, ask them to sign up to be on our mailing list, donate to American Promise, sign the American Promise business statement. All of those things are so much worse than the very first suggestion that was made on this call, which was ask to learn more about their organization and their priorities, and ask to be connected with the right person who would be able and willing and interested's a better word, to hear more about what we're doing at American Promise and where there might be overlap. That's a really good first ask, to learn more about their priorities, to share a little bit about what we're doing, and to see if there's any opportunity for overlap and working together going forward. And we're sort of thinking about this in a similar way to what we think of with the elected official champion scale that we think through, where, you know, not every member of Congress, for example, is going to be a champion for our cause, but, you know, we can slowly, through each interaction with them, move them more and more towards being actively helpful. And I'm just putting in the chat here something that's helpful for me to think through, sort of a relational arc where, you know, we make first contact with some person, and, you know, if that goes well, they might be interested to learn more, and we might learn more about what they're doing. You know, if that goes well, they might actively be a one-time action taker, you know, and writing a letter to the editor, or, you know, attending a chapter meeting, or, you know, it could take any different shape or form. over time, they might start doing those one-off actions more consistently and become more of a consistent contributor. And over time, that consistent contributor might turn more into a champion of our cause. So that's one way to really think through sort of the arc of any relationship with an elected official or with a staff person at a organization like the one that we're researching here, the Great Lakes Maritime Task Force. And I'll just keep that in the chat to I really think it's helpful to refer back to and think about. But we're back to what we're going to say to this organization if we get through to them, and we're at the point of first contact where we're reaching out, and we're going to be prepared, as Joan said, with specific research that we've done, even more than what we've done just in the 5 minutes on this call. But for this example, we're not going to spend 30 minutes looking into this exact organization. But most importantly, we're going to be prepared to listen to what they have to say and to really actively listen, to be specific. We're going to do a role play on this call now. I'm going to ask someone to play the staff member at this organization, the Great Lakes Maritime Task Force. And you don't know anything about American Promise. You might not want to talk to me very much. I'm going to play you. You're a smart, fired up chapter member doing some strategic outreach. And there's no right way to do this, but is there anyone who really wants to get everyone off the hook and volunteer to do this role play where you're this staff person who doesn't know anything about American Promise? And yeah, Joan, I see your hand up. Thanks for volunteering. And I see Ashwari has a question here. Is the goal finding out whether the need for paying money to politicians is an issue for them? That would be really good information to have. You'll see how I approach the conversation. I'm not going to immediately ask them that, but I'm hoping that we can find that out over time, whether it's on this call or another call. So thank you, Joan. I'll be you, and you'll be this staff person. You can be whoever you want. I won't know until you answer the phone.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the phone is ringing. Ring, 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 ring.
Hello. This is the Greater Maritime, whatever it is.
Yeah. Oh, hello. My name is Joan DeVore. I'm a volunteer with my American Promise chapter. I'll say you're in Ohio, as you're calling this Ohio organization. Is this an all right time to be calling?
Yeah, I have a few minutes. Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, thank you. And we're focused on getting money out of politics by way of a constitutional amendment. And it's a political organization, but we're really interested in everyday experiences of people in Ohio around the impacts of money in politics, in particular, how that can sometimes lead to increased pollution. I'm wondering if you are the person appropriate to ask questions to about sort of the causes of pollution that you guys work so hard and diligently to keep out of your Great Lakes there.
Yes, I'm one of the administrative people here, so I do get involved in working with people on writing up position papers and in seeing where different legislators are on the positions that are important to us. We have this thing where we give awards out, once a year to legislators that we feel have been responsive to us.
Yeah, I saw that you guys gave an award to Senator Portman. We've actually met with his office 1 or 2 times, so that was actually how I thought to reach out to learn a little bit more about your organization. And it sounds like correct me if I'm wrong, but a pretty positive relationship with elected officials who are, directly connected to, sounds like, sort of the funding available to do the good work that you do. Is that right? Or could you talk a little bit more about that relationship?
Well, over the, we've got some very, we're in the shipping industry, represent the shipping industries, and it's important that the Great Lakes is taken care of to where do what we need to do. And we found that it varies. Sometimes that award winds up going to a Democrat, some that award goes to a Republican. So it's very much of an individual relationship that we make that determination on each year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. It seems like a hard but important job that you have. We meet, once a month as a chapter, and we're always talking about the real world impacts. I'm wondering, would it be appropriate for me to follow up via email with sort of the logistical information for our next meeting? I would love to share your perspective with our chapter members. And I'm sure they'd be really interested to learn more about your organization and what you do. Would that be all right to follow up with that information to see if it might work with your schedule?
Yeah, it sounds like you meet with legislators sometimes too. Yes.
That's right. Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see if there are any legislators that, that you have strong relationships with, that there's any overlap. That might be interesting to see. So yeah, I'd be interested in learning a little bit more.
Super. Thank you. And we're going to exit the role play. Thank you, Joan. You did a fantastic job. And let's hear from folks. What went well about that? Not the role play was perfect. What went well about the conversation that we had? Feel free to shout it out.
Joan, understood immediately what you were talking about and went into something that is related to what you were talking about, which is probably going to be a little bit rare.
I couldn't believe my ears. This person was maybe already supportive of what we were doing, at least a little bit understood, the legislative process and, why a group like ours exists. And my initial ask wouldn't normally be right on that first phone call to come be a guest speaker at our next chapter meeting. But it seemed that this person was sort of interested in talking more about this and really informed. And so I thought, why not ask? It seems like this might be a quicker on-ramp than usual.
I think, can I just say something real quick? Yeah, well, I thought the ask was to just listen in on one of your meetings, not to be a speaker, but whatever. But anyway, so yeah, I didn't want to be totally unrealistic, but I think that self in the role of someone that was kind of involved with that award thing. So it could vary, but when they talk it could very well be that I would go to the meeting and find out that even though we gave awards to certain people and you have a relation, there may still be an issue clash. We haven't discovered that yet in terms of what we think is good for the Great Lakes versus what, people on other areas of the environmental argument might be feeling. So in my role, I was like, gee, I want to see whether we're aligned or not. And that's what I would go to that meeting to find out.
Yeah, so that's good feedback. Something that I could have done better then is to, offer more sort of an explanation of what we do and maybe have a little bit more explicit of a suggestion to you that we either, on that call that we were on, maybe I would have kept talking for 10 minutes and asked a couple of open-ended follow-up questions and, been prepared to answer your follow-up questions or maybe offer that information to you just to give a little bit more background. That's definitely a great point. And one thing that I could have done better is I could have asked for your name. You know, that's always nice and considerate and helps to build a relationship. One thing that was quite good, the direction it was going. Oh my gosh.
Uh-oh. You froze up.
Uh-oh, I wonder if it's the storms.
Yeah,
Frozen.
it looks like he had a power outage. The lights
Glitch.
blinked off for a second.
Yeah.
I'll text
Oh,
him.
either.
You know what I was wondering?
It's still snowing up there?
It was kind of
Oh.
snowy and rainy.
Okay, because here, I mean, we're still getting snow showers, but
No.
Okay, so I was wondering, I mean, I would be tempted with the to go to Open Secrets and do research on the group first. Did anybody else?
Yeah, because I didn't know, you know, I agree with you, like, because the question in my mind is, where is this organization in terms of giving donations and stuff like that?
Yeah.
And that would definitely affect how he's going to probably try to get back in, how I
Well-
would speak to those people, you
Well,
know?
we would be less likely to even contact them though, wouldn't we?
Yes.
So that
Right,
that
yeah.
kind of you know, sours our efforts right off the bat.
They may be
Yeah.
contributing, but feeling like they have to get their positions
Good point.
covered, and in which case they don't want to be doing it, but they're
That's
doing it
right.
because
Yeah.
they're forced
Your
to do
phone
it.
next to the, and see if you can be heard. Okay, hold up. Okay,
Is he
guys,
okay?
I have Azor on the phone. He's on speaker, so Azor, go ahead and speak.
Azor, you need to pay those bills.
Sorry about that. Yeah,
Azor, you can call the number. Tell him to call the number on the
Yeah.
sign up, and then he
yeah,
can be.
I'll call back in just a second here. Marnie, I'm hoping that you can continue leading this conversation, getting some more feedback for this, and I'll be on in just a minute here. Thank
She
you.
already has started.
Thanks, Azor.
All right. So Vicky, you were mentioning about Open Secrets.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, you know, but again, that would kind of, if I saw that they were heavily involved in a PAC or something like that, I might be less likely to reach out to them. So that's probably not a good thing. But then you don't want to like, you know, I don't want to feel like a fool if they're so, you know, they're heavily involved in trying to
You
influence.
have to be,
stuff.
you have to prepare for that, you know, but like someone said that, maybe it was you too, or Shwari, that they may be in a position where they're feeling like they have to give money and they don't want, and they'd be very receptive to that message.
Marie
of
said
being-
that. Yeah.
So I think that is something that we'd have to at least try to come up with, if possible, to get a sense of where they might be. But if we don't get a sense, then we have to be very circumspect about how far we go in that conversation.
The other thing that we might be looking for that I think Azor might have been moving toward was,
And I'm
If
back
Azor-
here now. Yeah.
there you are.
We
Good.
didn't say anything bad about you.
You know, even if you did it, I don't need to, it's just all recorded. I'll say that. And I hope the internet holds. I think it should, but fingers crossed. But don't let me interrupt.
Well, I was wondering if you were leading toward the notion of this, if this is an organization that cares about the lake being clean, then they're worried about pollution. And is that where we're trying to go? Where they are seeing that the polluters have candidates in their pockets?
You know, I think long term, that's the exact place that we're trying to take this. And I think short term, really our goal is to learn more about the organization from the appropriate person. So I think it's pretty rare that the right person actually is the one that answers the phone. I'm actually going to ask us to do another role play, and this time we're gonna flip the roles, where I'll be the person who answers the phone, and you'll be yourself. And just a heads up, I'm not going to be the right person, and I'm not going to have very much time. And your goal is going to be to quickly get the information of the right person to follow up for this type of introductory conversation. But is there anyone who would
That's
quickly
the more
volunteer?
likely scenario.
I think so. I think so.
If I just said, well, no, I don't know anything, that would kind of like not bring much to the conversation, but I see what you're trying to do.
No, it's helpful to see what a really good stroke of luck could look like, because this will happen too. But is there anyone who would volunteer to do this second role play? Great, thanks, Monica.
Okay.
All right, the phone's ringing and I'm answering, and I'm very busy, so I say hello.
Hi, my name is Monica, and I'm with an organization that I think works on a lot of things that your organization would care about. Do you have a minute?
I really have about 30 seconds, so half a minute. Thanks for calling, Monica.
Okay, quickly, what's your name?
My name is Azor.
So Azar, my organization works on making sure that the goals of the people and organizations like yours actually get through Congress. We're working on trying to get corruption out of the government so that organizations like yours can be more effective. I'd be very interested in getting the contact information for somebody in your group that I might talk with more about this.
I don't know very much about that. I really just run the front desk here, but I think probably you're looking to talk with our policy director, and her name is Monica Rodriguez. What a coincidence! Yeah. But I could send you, or I could give you her email address if you would prefer to follow up with her. Is that okay?
That would be fantastic. Yeah, I can take that down.
Super. And which organization did you say you were with again, Monica? And
quickly, I do apologize. I didn't give you the name in the 30 seconds that we had there. It's called American Promise.
Okay.
And our single goal is to get a constitutional amendment to get corruption out of our government so that we can get government working on things that the people want.
Super. Okay. Well, I will get you that email address right now. I'll spell it out for you. And thank you so much for your call.
Thank you for your time. Have a great day.
Great. All right. Role play.
Uh-oh. Lost him again.
About that.
Oh, we lost you there for a moment.
Immediate thoughts and feedback. What was positive about that? Joan, I see your hands up.
Well, I thought that Monica was asking really good open-ended questions. And her first goal, once she knew you weren't really the right person, was to find out who it was by giving enough explanation without dragging it out to get to that right person. So the next play for Monica would be see what she can find out about that person in addition to the organization to kind of prepare for the follow-up call.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that
a follow-up contact.
That was my feedback too. Really nice job of quickly asking, who is the best person to talk with about this issue.
Very, very economy of words. She got it up quickly enough that it was understandable, but didn't, take too much time of the person that obviously didn't have much time. So good economy of words.
Thank you.
I also thought that it was very well done in terms of once she found out that the person on the other end of the line wasn't as receptive as she would have hoped for, possibly, she began to emphasize really what the organization that she's with could do for the organization that they're with, especially when they mentioned, oh, I just run the front desk. It's like, okay, well, usually if you mention something like, oh, we can benefit your company, when it's an individual, you might be more reserved about how you respond to that. But when it's something from a larger standpoint and you're the face of a company, then it's a matter of, well, this should be directed to someone above me. And that really gave me, or would have given me if I was in the line, oh, okay, I should probably direct them to someone, a little bit farther above me who might actually be able to help. So I thought that emphasizing the benefits that company and that organization could reap from a call with them was also really well done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, well said. Yeah, I see, Barbara, you've got your hand up.
One of the things I noticed on both of the calls is that one of the first questions was, do you have any time to talk? Like you're asking them, you're trying to get their permission. So you have sort of smoothed the way into it rather than launching into what we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great observation, and yeah, I think a good thing to be in the habit of, and yeah, absolutely.
So much contact these days is not at the same time. In other words, it's not like real-time contact, it's email back and forth. So when you're in real time with someone, you really have to bracket that with finding out how much time they can give you at that moment.
Yeah, and it's not a perfect science, any of this. We had the option of sending an email and not even starting with a phone call. My personal preference when given that option is to try a phone call first. But I know that's not necessarily everyone's style. Do folks have any immediate thoughts on sort of that decision we made to start with a phone call, have the email as an option, but who knows what'll happen on a phone call? I might talk to Joan, who wants to champion our cause immediately.
Actually, Azor, I think, usually I do email, and that's not really, then you sit and you wait, and did they read it? Are they ever going to answer? I think that, yeah, I'm going to start doing that, just calling people and seeing, at least, you've talked to somebody at the beginning. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
So I just
second that.
I see people have their hands up, because I just want to throw something in that we had a professional writing course at our company, and this woman was phenomenal. And she said, whatever medium you're using, if you don't know this person, if you're coming in with a question like this, the first thing you should do is show them you respect their time. So even if it's a phone call or an email, in the first line in your email, something like, just like to briefly explain what we do, something to show that you respect their time and thank them.
Yeah, that's a great word to always live by. I see Beverly has her hand up. Beverly, thanks for joining. And you're muted there, Beverly.
I wanted to share that I reached out to a state legislator this past week. I sent an email and a follow-up email, never got a response. I finally called, talked to a legislative aide who then said, okay, yeah, let's talk about this. Please send me that email so I can familiarize myself with the issue beforehand. So bottom line was the call worked better, but then, he wanted the follow-up email for more detail. And then we talked today. So anyway, reinforcing your point that I think the phone call is better.
And, oftentimes you'll get an answering machine, and then you'll leave a short answering, or you'll leave a short message. And if you've got an email, then, you might follow up with, sort of the equivalent in an email as well. But I tend to agree, starting with the phone call, if you have that information, is generally a good idea. And most conversations that you have, if they're productive ones and the person really does want to learn more, they'll ask you to follow up by email. Or if it's not a productive feeling conversation, you might ask, I know you're very busy, could I follow up with more information by email? And to keep trying to move it along that way. And, not everyone's going to be a champion of our cause. Most people aren't going to be champions, actually. And wherever someone wants to be on this ladder of engagement, that's okay. Even if the answer is they don't want to be on our ladder of engagement at all. We don't need to bang our head against a wall over and over again, because there's a whole lot of people to engage on this work. We're going to keep moving on in the call. We've got about 10 minutes left. And when we're talking about networking, like we are here, it's a really broad topic. This example that we did for the bulk of the time tonight really is the hardest type of networking, where you don't know the person at all with the pre-existing relationship or connection. You really only know based on your research that it might be good. to know them. That's why we practice this type of example, because there will be many different instances where it's a little bit easier and you have more things in common immediately than, talking with someone that you don't know and who they don't know you and you've never heard their voice before or anything like that. But, this kind of call or email in particular, we sort of touched on this, but the more research you're able to do ahead of time, the better. Places to look for this type of information: one, their website, their own words and their own research that they're putting out to the world. Another place to always be checking and making the most of is the American Promise Resource Library, which has a lot of useful information. It doesn't have all of the information that's related to this amendment, as there's more and more of that every single day. And in the case that you don't see something in that American Promise Resource Library that you think could be really helpful, say for a conversation with this organization, why money in politics harms conservation efforts. If you can't find that in the resource library, I don't think that explicit sort of fact sheet is created. Marnie, I'm going to volunteer you. I talk to Marnie, and as a team, we'll help put it together to make that type of information readily accessible for anyone in the country, wherever you might need it. But again, we talked about this one sort of extremely hard example of networking. There's a lot of different types of networking, and what are some of the other settings that you might be doing outreach to someone not yet involved with what we're doing? Feel free just to shout it out if an idea comes to you.
Could be just a fluke. There's so many people on so many different kinds of Zoom meetings, and you could be at a meeting that's totally unrelated to this issue, but come across someone who says something that, that makes you think they might be worthwhile to connect with for whatever reason. Then you chat with them or send them a chat and say, can I talk to you sometime? Can I email you or message you sometime to talk about this commonality that I just found that may be only peripherally related to the meaning, to the matter of the meeting, that how you met that person. But if you see a connection, it might be worth pursuing.
Yeah, you read an interesting letter to the editor, as an example Ashwari gave earlier, exactly like that. What are some other settings that people want to just shout out?
I mean, in a normal, non-COVID environment, you could be, for example, waiting in line in the DMV and they have the TV on, and oftentimes they, for some strangers, have political channels on the television. So maybe start conversations like that, and someone's like, "Oh, well, I feel this way about big money in politics," or "I feel that corporations own too much." Then it's like, "Oh, well, now we can segue into talking on American Promise and going forward," and that might be something. Just really small conversations that people get into, at the grocery store, and just when you're out, and just like she said, a fluke just happens.
That's exactly right, and won't we all be happy when we're chatting to people at the DMV again?
Lord knows we never thought we'd
want to go.
I can't wait.
The supermarket, but not the DMV.
Anyone else? I think that's exactly right. Everyday life. Let's have our eyes open. I see Barbara has her hand up.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of hiking with our local outdoor club, and a lot of the discussions come about politics. Yep, there's Joan and Barb Miller. And a lot of times we get into some, I'm very careful about talking politically because I think most people know what my bent is. But for instance, I was talking to somebody just on Saturday. She works full time, so she doesn't have that much time. But somehow I forget how we got into this whole I don't even know how we got into it. And I was telling her about American Promise, and very interested. I said, come to a meeting. Marie, I'll tell you if she's interested. And she just wants to know more about it. And just having like what we were just saying, what Yasmin was just saying, you know, it's just everyday life, like who you come into contact with. And when you start talking to these people, you'd be very surprised at what their interests are and how much they would like to get involved.
Yeah.
Everyday
Well,
life.
well said, you know, everyday life, you know, going to events, talking to your friends. I know Marnie just led that training all about friend banking. That's absolutely part of this conversation. You know, you hear someone on the radio talk about something sort of adjacently related, looking them up, doing some research, finding some contact information. There's all sorts of settings that, you know, we're interacting and communicating with people about what we're doing and trying to bring more people into this effort. And really the main point of this meeting is there's no one right way to do it, but there are a couple of things to always have in the back of your mind. And, you know, some of those things we talked about are, am I talking to someone based on research I've done? You know, if you're bumping in with someone at the supermarket, maybe the answer is no. Maybe that's just an opportunity that's arisen. But, you know, if you're talking with someone at an organization, like we use that example, that's research leading you there. If you're talking with someone because you saw a letter to the editor that they wrote and tracked down some contact information, that you've done some research to get to that point of making your first contact. Second thing is, am I actively listening? Do I go into a 3-minute monologue about why American Promise is so important and why we need to save the country with the constitutional amendment? Or do I ask some open-ended questions and start getting to know this person and hearing about what's important to them? Active listening, really helpful and important for any of these different settings. And lastly, you know, have I thought through a clear and appropriate ask to make based on how this conversation goes? And, you know, where do I currently see this person on the sort of advocate scale that I'm thinking through? You know, is this the first time I'm talking with them? If it is, my ask is going to probably be smaller than if it's, you know, the 10th time I'm talking with them and, you know, they've maybe done one thing with our chapter before. So that third thing, really having a clear and appropriate ask thought out ahead of time. Maybe you adjust as you go, but it's helpful to think it through ahead of time. So we're just about at the end of this call. I've got a little bit, one last real point to make as we wrap up, but any immediate thoughts and feedback on what we've talked about here? Any points that are confusing, any points that resonated? Feel free just to shout it out here.
Well, I'm looking at the chat and I'm thinking about someone you might meet on a hike or in the supermarket line. And you're out of, you know, the initial asks that would have to be very simple. You know, someone saying, send them a link to a video, someone saying, get their email address and put them on the email list. Are those, you know, what are some of the main, like sort of really beginning level asks when you just meet someone in an environment like that, you know, just by chance? It's not even someone that you proactively called.
Yeah, you know, it's your best judgment, but quick things are, you know, I'd love to follow up with more information and learn more about, you know, what you're all about and share what we're about. You know, could I email you? And, you know, email is generally a great way to sort of convey that type of information quickly. So that's the right way to be thinking about this. I want to keep going here so we end on time. But next month, looking ahead, we're adding a layer to this. Last month we talked about researching and analyzing. This month we're talking about networking strategies. Next month our conversation is going to be about building a state campaign, and it's going to incorporate elements of this research and of this networking practice that we've done, and it's going to go one step further then and identify really a motivating political goal to start working towards. I know we all take a lot of our time doing things to move this amendment forward, and And that's a motivating political goal, and it's the motivating political goal. But if we're in Ohio, for example, we might say, a sub goal that we're really fired up about working on is we want whoever wins that Senate seat in Ohio to be a supporter of this constitutional amendment. And we're going to start orienting our work around that political goal, because if we get Rob Portman or his replacement on board, then Sherrod Brown, the Democratic senator, we know he's on board. Our delegation of senators are on board, and our state's getting more and more ready to ratify this amendment, and it's going to impact all of these things in a positive way. We're not going to get into it all right now, but next month is about setting these sort of sub-political goals that are specific to our state and how we can really be thinking about this process. Because I suspect that sometimes for something as big and as national as a constitutional amendment with as many different pieces, it can feel a little bit scattered, or like we're doing things that might not always be the absolute best use of our time. And this process that we're going through really is aimed at sharpening our strategy overall, so that even if we're doing the same amount of work, it all feels like it's extremely productive work. And frankly, with a solid strategy and a smart campaign objective, we'll be talking more about this next month. You'll probably even do less work, but it'll be the right work. So that's the message I want to end with tonight. And thank you guys for tuning in and being such active participants and doing the role plays and all of this and bearing with me as I lost power and all that. So thank you guys. If everyone wants to go off mute and say good night, that's always fun to hear the chorus of voices. But thanks, you guys. Have a good rest of your night.
Thanks,
Right.
everybody.
everyone.
Thank
Hi,
you.
everybody.
Right.
See
Thanks,
ya.
Thank
guys.
you, Marnie. Thank you, Azor.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.